I'm Gerd Pfitzenmeier. I'm a journalist and not a scientist. That's maybe a little different to all the other lessons you got in the last few weeks, maybe in the next weeks as well. As Niklas told you, we met 1991, and this was the first Children's Summit called Natur, Kindergipfel Natur. You will hear about this later a little bit. It was our magazine, and it was an environmental magazine, and this was the title of this magazine. And Kindergipfel is the German word for Children's Summits, and we did these conventions with around about 1,000 children 3 times. 1991 in Stuttgart, 1991 in Frankfurt am Main, 1993 in Stuttgart, and 2 years later, 1995 in Berlin as well. We brought together these children, and the initial point was the first war in Iraq. There were many demonstrations here in Germany against this war, and some colleagues from us in other newspapers said these demonstrations from children against this war is not quite right, because they are their parents pushed them to the streets to say, yes, we are against war, because the parents don't want to do this. Huh? And we, as at that time young journalists, we had all of us had children. We said, no, we know that these subjects are brought from children into the family. We noticed from our work, we noticed that environmental subjects always from the children was transferred into the family. So one colleague said very spontaneously, let's do a big children's conference. And our editor-in-chief at that time said, on the next day, this is a good idea, let's do it. So that was the spontaneous beginning of our children's summit. So I will tell you a little bit more about this in the short video I've prepared for this lesson today.
Yeah, just one question before we start. How was it for the German young people? How did it feel during this meetings and conferences? Because this is not an academic conference, it was a conference for young people and youth workers. Also, you have to know that here is SESC from Brazil, from Sao Paulo, which is doing a fantastic job for young people as well, and doing different projects offering sport and youth activities for them, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So can you tell me, so how was it for the German young people? Yeah. How did you feel?
We were very, very surprised at that time. We wrote an article in our magazine about the idea to have as we thought as journalists, a small convention with our readers and their families and their children. And our editor-in-chief wrote in this article the question, what do children want to discuss in such a summit? And the effect was, for us, very, very surprising. We got, I think, about 5,000 letters from children from all over Germany with fantastic ideas. Mostly because we were environmental magazine, mostly deal with environmental issues. They have proposals how to manage garbage. There were proposals to get ecological way of producing energy. There were ideas for better mobility and things like that. And this was the starting point. We said, okay, we want to discuss all the children in Germany with this about this subject. And we said, okay, we invite you to, at that time, Frankfurt, because I think it was the environmental head of the Frankfurt town, I don't know the right word, town hall.
Yeah, city hall.
Yeah, the city hall. He said, you have the best idea, I have the best place, and he offered us the Frankfurt Paulskirche as meeting point for this convention with children. Frankfurt Paulskirche is the place where in 1848 the first German parliament came together. So this is a very symbolic place.
Yeah.
And we said, okay, this opportunity to do our conference at this place, we never can get it, so we have to do this. And so it was the start for our organization. We have had only, I think, 6 months to organize this. We invited groups from Germany. They do small children summits at their local in their local areas, and the idea was they should organize small discussions with the heads of their community and with maybe managers from some enterprises. So and they had to find their visions, which they want to write down in a contract, which should be the goal of our conference.
So you prepared a contract with young people, and who has signed it?
It was signed then at the Frankfurt Paulskirche in, I think it was September of 1991, from children and politicians and CEOs, which we invited to this conference to talk with the children. But it had we had one motto for this conference. We said, children will speak, the adults have to listen. That was, I think, the main subject for our conferences. So
yeah, exactly. Usually politicians are talking.
Should speak, and children listen to them. We want to bring this wide versa, and say, children speak and adults have to listen.
Yes. Do you think that nowadays it could be possible to organize a conference like this?
I think it's possible in every time and in every place.
And there is some conferences like this today?
I don't know. A good friend of mine wants to push me since several years to reorganize this, but it's so hard work to organize this. It's a full-time job for for several persons, and it's a financial hard work. So
Yeah.
in
Yes, to finance it, yeah.
1995, we gathered to organize this. We gathered, I think, several 100,000 of euros to do this conference.
Yes, yes. Thank you very much, Gerd. And we would like to watch your short film, which you prepared. And do you want to share your screen, or I should do it?
Please do it.
Okay. I try to share this. Hopefully you can see it. Okay.
Yeah.
Can you see it? Please give me a feedback.
I can see.
Hello, everybody. I'm happy to meet you here today and to get the chance to speak to you and afterwards to have some discussions with you. Unfortunately, it's a virtual meeting only today. We interchange via computers. In these pandemic times, it's pretty normal. Nevertheless, I'm sorry for that. I would have very much preferred to meet you as real persons. That, I think, would be much nicer. Maybe we could become friends then, like my friend Miklos Manhidi and I got friends. It's 30 years ago. It was the time when he and I were engaged with other people in events which promoted participation of children in Germany and in many other countries, and we enjoyed that very, very much. I can tell you about that a little bit later, so please be patient for some minutes, please. It's the first time today that I do a video lesson, so please don't be too censorious. After this lesson, the best for me would be if I could hear you to say, yes, we see new aspects to look at some things that we are engaged in. I hope that you will have some insights that matters. I shall try to offer you some conclusions from my point of view after 30 years of working as a journalist and being engaged in environmental and conservation issues and as a consultant, for example, in sustainability. I worked with enterprises and gave advice to them. Today I am producing Global Magazine. It's an environmental website with daily news every day. We cover scientific issues, we cover environmental issues, we cover economical issues. We have a circulation of about 300,000 pages every month. Don't worry when you look at my first picture, which I show you. A sheet of paper, a pencil. What does this mean? Our subject that we are talking about today. And if you look at the third thing on the picture, a cup of coffee, this is, at least for me, the most important thing. These three things symbolize all which I need for my daily work. I'm a journalist, and journalists are humble, you see. I think now it's time to introduce myself. My name is Gerd Pfitzenmeier, but I think you may call me Gerd, that's much easier. My family name is, for most people, have a problem with it, and even Germans often couldn't pronounce it in the right way. I'm 62 years old, and I think this is an age where most people think about retirement. For me, it's a time to restart. It's time to look forward and to start a new game. I've done this since I quit my school classes for several times. I want to tell you something about my profession, and my profession is, I said it before, that I'm working as a journalist. And this is a dream job, really, for me. Though your speaker today is not a scientist, as most in this curriculum who talked in advance to you, So journalists are looking at their surroundings and they look what happens all around in the world. I draw my deductions and I rate things which I am regarding. That is what I want to tell you today. And at the end of this lesson, I hope that I can give you some advice for your life. Journalism is a dream job, I told you, and it's my dream job. That's what I want to say. And what does this mean? Being a journalist provides many possibilities. I can travel a lot. I can meet lots of people and different people. I can get lots of experiences. I can meet very different people. So, for example, once I met Prince Charles. I visited different countries, for example, the US, Brazil, the Philippines. I was in Ethiopia, in Southern Africa, in Israel, and many other countries. I learned from different cultures and different civilizations. I learned to listen to different opinions from people, and I create a big network that is helpful for my work. With this background, journalists are able to interpret what other people have to say. Our job is to interpret statements from politicians or statements from scientists, for example. Yes, we have to sometimes simplify things that people can better understand them. We have to rank informations. Maybe we should comment them, but we are duty bound to truth. Fake news are en vogue, but as good journalists, we should give up on it. Journalists always should assist their audience, either in newspapers or in the radio station or on TV station. They have to make it easier for their audience to understand facts and figures and to understand information they want to give. This is not always an easy task. Journalists have to struggle sometimes, like Sisyphus, the old Greek hero. I think most of you know his story. He has to push a big rock uphill, and every time, shortly before he reached the top of the hill, the rock rolls downhill. But Sisyphus didn't surrender. He didn't give up. Again and again, he continues his work, comes down the hill and rolls the rock uphill. I think he's a symbol of our work as journalists. There are a lot of situations we have to write again and again, and sometimes we wonder whether our audience won't understand what we are writing or doing in our radio broadcasting or TVs. Or let me give you a second example for what I want to say to you. Look at the next picture. I think you all know this girl, Greta Thunberg, the young Swedish girl. She was sitting in front of the Swedish parliament for weeks and months, demonstrating for climate protection. She inspired youth from all over the world. In many countries, they establish their own climate protection campaigns. Meanwhile, politicians from all over the world listen to what Greta is telling them, even though they to take action for climate protection. The Fridays for Future campaign is a strong campaign, even in the pandemic situation and times. Like Sisyphus, Greta is also an archetype of what I think journalists should be. She seems to be mulish enough, she's persistent, and she's very, very consequent. And this leads me to my first conclusion I want to tell to you. Always remain curious and open-minded. And remember, as a motivation for life, see always the chances instead of restrictions or problems. Like Sisyphus, to never surrender. This is my credo that I've drawn from 35 years of being a journalist. I started at a local newspaper, a very small one, but a good one. Years before, I've been writing for a newspaper as a scholar in my free time. Especially, I did sports news writing and a weekend when the journalists from that newspapers want to be at home with their families on the weekend. And me, as a young scholar, I had the time to write the reports. I went to university, I studied history and political science, but I always try to work for newspapers. And one day I got the information that there's the chance to get a job as volunteer at a small local newspapers near my hometown. It was a quick decision for me. I went to university, I quit being a student, and I want to be a volunteer at a newspaper. From the beginning, I was lucky to find good advisors. I've had an old school publisher within this newspaper, and he was a very tolerant man. So my colleagues and I got all the chances to improve our skills, to learn and to try being good and innovative journalists. The next level in my journalist career was when I went to a magazine. This was an environmental magazine, and at this time, in these years, it was a very newly subject. Environmentalism was pretty new, even in Germany, and we felt like pioneers. Some years later, I took the chance to buy an environmental magazine by myself, Natur. It had a circulation from round about 100,000 issues every month. And this was the biggest environmental magazine in Germany for many, many years. We started our own TV production unit 1 or 2 years later. We bought some smaller magazines, which we integrated in our magazine. We merged, this was a big deal, with Cosmos, another scientific magazine in Germany. So my dream comes true. I was an editor-in-chief and a publisher of my own magazine. For many years before, I met several children of publisher families, and they always said, "Oh, I don't want to be the successor of my father or my mother as a publisher. My father was a mechanic, and I envied these guys. And now suddenly, in the midst of the 1990s, I got the big chance. I heard that Natur should be shut down. I remembered saying from my lawyer, who got introduced to an Italian magazine, which he thought was very good, and he asked me some weeks before whether we could do this magazine together in Germany. I called him this evening and I said to him, Mr. Kantenbein, I've got a much better idea than doing this Italian magazine. So we met the next morning and we discussed some hours what to do, how we could manage this with Natur. We asked a third person and we sent a letter to the publisher who was from Zurich and made him the proposal to buy Natur and to continue this magazine. So it took only a couple of days and we were publisher by our own. So my dream fulfilled. For 10 years, I was from now on publisher and the editor-in-chief and CEO of our company. But no dream lasts forever. Shortly after the new millennium had started, the whole media branch came in troubled situations. So did the FAZ, the Frankfurt Allgemeine Zeitung, which was the mother of Deutsche Verlagsanstalt, and Deutsche Verlagsanstalt was my partner since we merged with Cosmos. Frankfurt Allgemeine Zeitung wants to sell the DVA, and that means I was losing my partner, so I have to decide what to do. And I decided to quit this job and to restart to be a freelance journalist for the next years. I was working as a freelancer for other magazines, and I published some books, as you can see in the next slides. Very different books, but that although means that I'm doing my research work with different subjects. During all these years, I was engaged in other projects as well. Very interesting projects, I think. For example, I got the chance to travel to Belarus, to Gomel, which is near the Ukrainian border, and is a region where the people in 1986 suffered very much from the radioactive fallout from Chernobyl. We brought new equipment for the hospital, for the children's hospital in Gomel to this time. But besides, I got the chance to visit with some scientists the exclusion zone from Chernobyl around the nuclear power plant. This was very, very interesting for me. I took the time to walk around with my camera, to walk around through the abandoned villages. And in some of these huts, I met some older people, and it was very, very interesting to talk to them. between 1991 and 1995, I organized the Natur Kindergipfel. This was a big media event which promotes children participation. We invited around 1,000 children aged 8 to 14 years to discuss their visions of the future. The motto of these events was children speak and adults have to listen. And to listen what the children have to say, we invited CEOs from many enterprises in Germany and other countries from Europe. We invited some politicians, even ministers, to discuss with the children their thoughts for the future. We also invite some scientists, some artists, and they all together sign a contract for the future with the children. And in order to not be a sheet of paper where this contract was written on, we organized for the next year to control whether the adults had kept their promises. These Kindergipfels were the starting point of a real movement which strengthened participation of young people. All those projects and many meetings which I had while I did my research work as a journalist lead me to some findings. And this is the next conclusion that I want to give to you. We need a historical perception. This is the only way that can lead us for the future. What does this mean? As an environmental journalist, it's very clear to see that all the problems of the world get bigger and bigger. We see that climate change is real. We see a big loss of biodiversity. We see acidification of the oceans. We see a big loss of all natural resources. And we see that our production of things we need and of goods we want is also producing huge amounts of garbage. I think we know that we have to change, we have to create a circular economy, and we have to fight hunger in the world, we have to fight war, and we have to engage for civil rights. There are enough duties for us as humans and for us as inhabitants of this planet if we want to rescue it. I know that young people are right when they are saying that we don't have time to wait and we have to act now. I know that's okay when they say that we as adults are too lazy and that we don't do enough to conserve our planet. But in fact, I think there are many results that show that the world changed in the last 30 years and that we achieved a lot of goals. And that is my third conclusion. Distress and frustration might be the result of our current situation, but distress and frustration are wrong advices and lead to a weak decision. Therefore, to change a given situation, you need creativity and you need a vision that would be much better than resignation. And I think we can be optimistic. Look what we have achieved in the last years. In Germany, for example, we decide to stop the production of energy from nuclear plants. We decide to phase out coal, and we push the production of green energy. Green ideas and green parties is now mainstream in Germany. And in some parts, the environmental conditions are very much better than 20 or 30 years ago. Most waterways have clearer water. The air in most regions is a lot better than 20 years ago. Even some species are back in Germany, like wolves, for example. Indeed, there are enough problems left. We have to work hard to make them better. And this is a duty for all of us, not only for a few. We should transfer agriculture in a better way. We should think about other forms of mobility, even electric mobility. If the current for these electric mobiles will come from ecological production. And we should for sure think about how to transform our economy in a more sustainable way. This is a key point of all things we have to do. To promote sustainability is the task for the future. It's a technical task, it's a political task, it's an economical task, but it should not be a task that no one of us might master. But remember what I've told you before in my first and second conclusion. It might be a task like Sisyphus task. And remember what I've told you about Greta. Like this girl, we all together should be patient, and we all together should be consequent if we want to achieve these big goals which I described just some sentences before. I'm sure we can achieve these goals. I'm sure we can master it if we don't resignate, but have new visions from our life in the future. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you so much. And now is the time for questions. My question is, Gerd, how many people exist like you?
I don't know. I hope.
Yes.
I hope there are many.
Okay. So what about the others? Okay. Miriam, do you have any question? So how is it in Philippines? Because we just heard about so many disasters in Philippines. How did you deal with this kind of issues?
Yeah, it's actually quite difficult and bad because sometimes political willpower are engaging so much rather than solving the issues and problems here. A lot of chaos, especially media, is also taking over with some of influences in the community or in the society. But yeah, people nowadays are a little bit clever because they actually don't tend to believe so much on social media, on the media itself. They already becoming more educated to distinguish fake news than the real ones news. So yeah, I was amazed with the work of our speaker today, Mr. Gerd. he has worked a lot in terms of his job, and with all the ups and downs. I know journalism, being a journalist is a tough job. I have seen a lot of people doing a lot of things, risking their lives, going into war just to make news, just to make stories out of a good story or a bad story. Yeah, in fact, our university was once a battle. What I mean, the place where my university is was once a battleground between army and the lawless people, and we witnessed some of the journalists who were in the battlefield itself, just to cover news and just to make story and to let people being informed of what is actually going on. Yeah, thank you. But congratulations, Mr. Gerd. It's a very tough job.
Okay, thank you. Iris,
Thank you.
what do you think?
I honestly do not have a strong opinion or information regarding this, as I joined to find out more about the topic itself. But I do have a question regarding the first advice. You said that we need to be motivated and curious about everything around us. Well, I know I do that sometimes, but I have a problem when I do it in the sense in which then I get somehow distracted of the reality or of the point I started from. And then I lose track of what I should actually do to reach my initial goal. So I was wondering how you managed to get through with that, or if you know what I...
There are many. My way was very often disrupted. So I can understand you when you say it's not so easy to be so focused. No? But I think my advantage is that I'm some years older and I can look on a very much wider lifespan, and I see what has changed in, let's say, the last 30 or 40 years. So that makes me turn to be optimistic, because I see or I can see that things aren't so worse as you think they are. They changed to better things in the last 30 years. I told you, when I was young, we were engaged with in a fight against nuclear power in Germany. Yeah? In the 1970s, no one was thinking that we now in the 21st century have decided in Germany to get out of nuclear power production. No?